not just where teaching happens. You talk about how our faculty see this and the opportunities we can open up to them. I went to do a class observation. Talked to one of my colleagues and said, hey, as part of the evaluation, what do you think about tomorrow? Or maybe it was later today, I don't remember. And she said to me, oh, I'm not teaching today. The kids are just sort of finishing up this project work. Think about that for a moment. I'm not teaching today. There's nothing to evaluate because the kids are just doing some stuff. I mean, imagine going to the play and being like, director's not doing anything today, right? Kids are just performing. The coach, go to the game. We don't go to the practices, we go to the game. But there's a mindset in the more traditional academic zone that we have to be attentive to if we want these changes to take place. So I do encourage you guys to pause here for a moment while I sort of talk. And it's not a bad idea to maybe make a mental note or write down a couple of examples where you have fallen prey to this, or you have allowed this to happen, or you have maybe not discouraged this type of thinking. And think about when you go back who you might talk to or how you might address this. But Mike Cobb really labeled this yesterday. This is an issue. I think it's one of the subtle mindsets, particularly at schools like ours, that we have to be attentive to if we really want to allow this type of change to take place. Anyone know, first quiz question of the day, anyone know, and this makes me very happy, I will say, because I'm a parent and both of my kids fall into this category. Anyone know what the general belief is for kids in developed countries born 2007 or later, how long they're going to live? (104 to 110). Okay. 50%, the projection is that 50% or more of kids born from 2007 or later in developed countries will live between 104 and 110. And for the majority of that, they're going to be healthy. So let's think about that. Right? In 1900, the average lifespan for a white male was 45. So high school was potentially 10%. Like if you were at the American high school, 4 years were potentially 10% of your life. Now we're talking about an impact of 3.7% of someone's life, maybe less. Okay. Kids who are probably going to be actively engaged in some way with the world and the world of work, whatever that ultimately feels like and looks like, till they're 90, 95. And so I think that does force us to step back and say, what are we doing during these incredibly pivotal 4 years where we are shaping their minds, we are shaping their perspective, we're shaping their journey as learners into this world? I think this is important in my mind to pay attention to. What kind of impact can you have, and what kind of impact should you have? Because I think it's folly to say packing it full of only content and expecting that content from 3.7% of someone's life to carry them all the way through might be worth revisiting when you talk about the difficulty of making these changes and thinking about the things you're doing at your school. Something that I think is a helpful framework for me to think about. And now I'm going to tell you my one personal story too. And so everyone has one of these, I think, and I probably have multiple, but this goes to that question of what you measure matters. It's one of the fundamental principles of the work around MTC. What you measure matters. So here's my story, and it's funny, I have a lot of these because I've been in education for a long time, but this was the most relatively recent. So a couple years ago, I went back to visit my in-laws in Philadelphia, and I just went out to a local kind of pub that night and went to watch a game with a friend. And the bartender, who was 28, I believe, was Kyle. And Kyle had been one of my students at the Haverford School long before. Kyle had come new in 9th grade, and Kyle had gone on to sort of a fairly impressive college. But Kyle was also, a recruited athlete on top of everything else. He'd been identified. So I remember just chatting with Kyle, and over the course of the conversation, multiple times, and I mean that multiple times, when Kyle talked about sort of being lost and not being unhappy that he was working at a bar, but still trying to figure out life, he made reference multiple times to how how much he loved his experience at Haverford, but how he just wasn't smart. And how what he learned there was he just wasn't smart. And then it was reinforced when he went to college because, he was only there because he was an athlete, because he just wasn't smart. And the reason this resonates isn't just for that part, but I remember a couple of things. I remember when Kyle's family first came, one of the promises was, if you come to this school, it'll change your life. Right? This school will create opportunities for you that don't exist. And the other thing I remember is Kyle having a hard time at points during his high school journey, and the school psychologist sitting with a group of us as we were strategizing on how to help different kids. And he said, the hardest part is this is a young man who should be a star in high school and maybe life. He's kind, he's thoughtful, he's hardworking, he's a great leader, he's charismatic, and he's even handsome. And instead he feels terrible about himself. Because what we measure matters, and what at the time was measured there, and in many of our schools is still measured, is right here. Because when he walked out the door, what he was told was, you're not as smart as, you're not as good as, you're not as capable as all of these other kids. As opposed to, hey, there are some areas around content that may not be your forte yet, but you're a superstar in these other things we value, in the things we put on our website. I actually joke all the time with independent schools, what we're really trying to provide is a transcript that allows you to match your website. Because your websites are all probably very balanced, and most of them don't even put content front and center. They're usually got to click down a few times to find it. But when you leave, what do we tell the kids? This is what matters, right? This very narrow construct of grades. So again, this is a good moment, I think, as you leave here and you say, well, when I see this thing, because you're going to see it, I promise you, I'm going to let you drive through it and everything. Do I want to have this conversation? Think of your own Kyles. And I have multiple stories like this. I think we all do. When you think about the purpose of our schools, and even if you want to take this concept of sort of equity, this opportunity of equity of instruction, of allowing kids to not go through a deficits-based model of education, but come out with a strengths-based model. Recognizing there are things you need to do better that you can grow through, but also be willing to say, there are also things you do exceptionally well that we should prioritize and promote and celebrate as well. So those are my little quick notes of things I would encourage you sort of selfishly to tally for yourself and be ready to carry out of this conversation. So how have we been helping schools approach this conversation? So as I lead to showing you the transcript, I just want to give you an update basically of how we've been doing this. So in the first year, really kind of coming into this year, we built the network and continue to build the network because, as you guys can imagine, it's a lot easier to have conversations around encouraging change when you have a membership approaching 300 than it is when you have a membership of 47. So part of it is just saying, look, we need you to help engage in this conversation. And then it's just been co-design. We've been creating prototypes, we've been sharing it with the membership, we've been sharing it with higher ed, and we've been saying, what do you think? And then we look at it again. And then this last year, with this actually launch of the transcript and the ability to get some real-time feedback, we're continuing with that process with the idea of saying, okay, now you've seen it, now you've actually had to make a decision using this thing. What do we need to learn about it? Where are impediments that we can handle? And where are impediments that we need to put sort of off to the side and say, that's stage 2, that's stage 3 for innovation. And our hope is that as early as 2020, we're going to begin to scale this. We're going to begin to create a system that allows us to grow this at a relatively rapid pace and continue that redesign process all the way through. The way we've done it, some of you have probably done this sort of speedy iteration internally as well, or you've used a model like this, is build that network, build a transcript, throw it out there, let people get feedback on it, see what sticks, try it again. The transcript that I'm going to show you today, that is the reader version of what we've built, is probably version 6 or 7 from what we initially launched as a prototype last year. So we do this a lot, and we do it quickly. Higher ed is, of course, a big topic, and I think particularly a big topic for independent schools who are considering, well, what does this mean? And in many ways, it's just a bit of boots on the ground and trying to get in front of as many people as possible. understanding that this is going to take time. I recently spoke to someone from the IB organization, and it was fascinating. We weren't really talking about a partnership per se as much as we were just chatting, and he'd been there a long time, and he said, it's funny, what you're doing makes a lot of sense. And he said, I think the speed of technology today and video conferencing and all these other things will allow you to do this more quickly than we did, but he said, just a heads up, it took us 25 years to get each state to ultimately say what you're doing is valid and credible. So he said, what we learned is even when you get one state, North Carolina doesn't talk to South Carolina. You just have to go sort of state university system by state university system and almost college by college to make this happen. But this is the way that we're hoping to move ahead. And there are real blocks there, around scholarships and other pieces that we, honestly, I don't know if we could answer right now. But that's the plan and the hope. As far as how people are receiving it, I could give you anecdotes from all over the place. We've tried to create maybe a quick snapshot here of a balanced feedback from college admissions officers, but I can find examples on all sides of what people love and what they don't, and how they engage with this. But the broad strokes is they're absolutely willing to look at this. And the bar is, as you guys know, all of you, the bar is not will they accept it. I mean, they accept narrative transcripts. I mean, you can, as I jokingly have said to schools along the way, you could draw a hand turkey if you're an accredited school and send it off and say, that's our transcript. It's a hand turkey. And they take it. They might not like it, but they take it. What we're trying to get them to say is we appreciate and like this just as much as its traditional transcript. That's the bar we're trying to get to. As far as what we do with our member schools, one of the things we do is basically say, here's a mirror, where are you? And then let us meet you there. Okay, so I already want you to start thinking about this. I'm going to have you guys take a minute and a second to think about where you are. I'm going to give you some guidelines for doing that and then share it with a couple folks nearby. But this is a survey we did of our members, and one of the things that was interesting for us is this is not, as you guys know, a conversation that's never taking place on campuses. So if you look to the left-hand side there, most schools, over 90% of our member schools say they are doing project-based, problem-based, or service learning sort of immersive opportunities. So it's not as if these things are not being discussed or happening on your campus to some degree. The question is there a way to leverage those and move those forward? So here's how we work with our membership. Okay, and here's where you have to sort of do a little mental gymnastics, and I'm going to give you a minute or two to turn to someone else and explain where you guys are. When we started, and if any of you had even ever heard about one of our site director retreats or early conferences, it was a one-size-fits-all. It was, hey, we had 60 members, everyone come to a site director retreat and we'll just give you some PD to think about. Now we say to schools, where are you? Place yourself here, and then we're going to help you grow through that. So here's what I'm going to ask you guys to do, just sort of for a little fun and a little quick break in here. And when I talk to schools one-on-one, this is what I always do. I say, okay, tell me about your school. Tell me where you are. Not whether you're going to take this journey, but tell me where you are. So take a minute, and I'll give you a piece that actually gives you a little bit more of a breakdown of that. So take a minute, and then just turn to someone next to you, or if you're from the same school, maybe you can talk to each other, and just, for a minute, really, a minute or two, then I'll stop you. Where are you guys in this journey? Where is your school in this journey? So I don't know if this one's more helpful or the one before. This one? The first one? Just quick show of hands. Who, if anyone, said, we are exclusively at the step one, why change conversation? Couple folks there. Who found themselves in the midst of defining why change, the graduate profile and where they might go, or maybe even revisiting their K-12 learner outcomes to decide if they're really living them right now? Okay. Who has moved into part three in any degree? A couple, yeah. A lot of that's where most people are. And to be fair, most of our schools in that intellectual champions group I talked about are in some combination of 1, 2, and 3. These are not absolutes in most cases. Anyone out here feel like they're living in 4 or 5? And at those couple? Okay. Okay. So just to give you a sense of where you are and what you need to think about as you do something like this. So now, this is, not that this is some great big reveal, but what I do want to do for the last 30 or 35 minutes is show you what we've built, quickly drive you through it, and then give you a link. So if you're near someone with a laptop, to maybe play with it yourselves a bit, and you can take the link with you and play with it later, and then ideally get some feedback and some questions and some reactions to it. So, not this, right? So to set you up, this is not the game changer. This is what we mostly all have some version of right now. It's what we do. Okay? So this is not the different look. This is what is going to colleges and universities in small scale this year. This is not a tweak. Said that to a lot of schools. This is not a tweak. And I've said to schools, that someone said to me once, so what does your job entail, in general? And we were talking, and I said, well, this and that and the other thing, and a lot of it is selling courage and hope, to people who go, boy, I'd love to do this, but. So this is what's going to colleges, and just to give you a sense of how we got there from what you saw at the beginning to there. We started with some fundamental constructs, which if you've ever heard a MTC presentation, you might be somewhat familiar with. No grades, no GPA. What we've promised to universities is not that we're creating a universal curriculum that all MTC schools use, but that we have a universal presentation format that they can understand and navigate through quickly. It is sort of compact but layered. It focuses on the student, and it can be equitable in the way it presents kids. This is how we've done it. Again, I think it's another version of what I showed you before, how we've been attempting to sort of build through this over time, and where we are right now, which is living in the space of having real feedback on a real thing. And this is what we've learned as we've gone through it, that the evidence does matter, and having it easily accessible to college admissions officers at the surface of the transcript matters. The ability to scale and understand both the context and the pace of the learning journey, and that there's some sort of consistency to what it means, as well as noticing that there are common areas that as schools dive into this work, and you'll see as much as we give flexibility and support for defining how you want to shape your curriculum, most schools come back to the same constructs. And so we're wondering if ultimately we may be able to define something a little more consistent, and that it does matter to sort of both have the context for the learning journey, how does the school operate, and what's the pathway that a student goes through when they're on a campus, as well as finding out the right balance of what we have been called, I think, from one college admissions rep, summative context. Hey guys, this is still a decision-making process, and while I appreciate that this may not give me the same ease of access to universal comparisons, I probably still have to have some sense of how these kids compare to other kids in their school. So we've been wrestling with how we do things like that. So let's do this. Hopefully this works without a hitch. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to relatively quickly drive you through this transcript and show you how it works.